Hi, everybody. I hope this is finding you well and you're having a wonderful day. And it's a happy Friday here in the States. And I'm talking to Godless Granny, who's also an occupant of the United States. But she's about an hour behind me. But anyway, so I've got the pleasure of talking to Godless Granny. Her real name is Kelly, and we're going to talk about Christianity. We'll talk about atheism. We'll talk about Aron Ra because he's been particularly influential for Godless Granny. And I remember noticing that she had followed him. And right now, I just told her a little bit about my experiences over at the Apologetics Conference. And she has gone to, I think, at least one event with Aron Ra. And so
no, I've never met him in person.
Oh, you've never met him in person. Okay. Mm-mm. So I guess I want to ask you who you have met in person, if you have met anyone.
I've met Neil, the 604 atheist. I've met Paula Gia, Shannon Q. Ozzy had an event in Fort Wayne about 2 years ago, and that's the only atheist event that I've been to.
Oh, so what was Ozzy? Is that Ozymandias?
No, it's Oz Tang, the Atheist Roundtable, or the Atheist. Yeah, the Atheist Round. No. Yeah, it is. It's TART, the Atheist Roundtable. There we go.
Roundtable. Okay. Yeah, well, very nice. So you met that. Actually, I have to be honest. I've had Paula Gia and Shannon Q on my channel before, and I always like those two. I think they seem like they're pretty easygoing.
Dr. Bowen, he was.
Oh, you met Josh Bowen. Okay.
Josh Bowen. And let's see who else was there. Holy Kool-Aid was there.
Thomas Westbrook. You know, it is so funny you say Holy Kool-Aid because just yesterday, for some reason on my feed, I spotted Holy Kool-Aid's stuff, and I noticed he hasn't posted anything in I think 6 months. He's been, I don't know if he just jumped off Twitter or what happened. And I also noticed that Josh hasn't posted anything on Twitter for a long time. And so maybe they've left do you know anything about that? If they decided just to sort of leave the platform?
I haven't followed Holy Kool-Aid for a while, so I don't know what's up with him. I do know that I don't know why Josh hasn't been on Twitter. Maybe he's got other things, but I have seen him around on other channels. So he's still very active in the community. Another person that was there was Godless Engineer. But of course, I've seen him before because he and I live in the same city.
Oh, you do? What, do you bump into the grocery store? Or?
No, it's a big enough city that we don't ever do that. But we do live in the same city.
So you two, well, actually, okay, I want to say hi to Captive Desk and Utopia Buster here in the chat. So welcome. So you live in the same city, and I know that you guys are somewhere in the Deep South.
We're in Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay. So you're getting a particular, kind of a different, I would say maybe a different view of Christianity being in Huntsville, Alabama, than you would be maybe if you were over in maybe the North or something. Would you say that's fair?
That is fair, but on the other hand, my husband was active duty Army for the first 13 years that we were married. And so I've actually been in the North far more than I've been in the South. I grew up in Wisconsin. And then when we got married, we went to Texas, and then we went to Kentucky, and then we went back to Texas, and then we went to Indiana. And so I lived, the two places I've lived in the longest were Indiana and Wisconsin.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you definitely don't have a Southern accent.
I've only been here for 11 years.
Yeah, so you've only been there. Okay, because see, I don't know if you know this, but I'm from Illinois originally.
Okay.
And it's so funny because I asked my students, I said, it was so funny on the first day I asked them, I said, guess where I'm from? And they actually asked, they're like the Midwest. How do you know? I've been down here since 1985. How have I not lost the accent? They said the way I say my A's, they could hear it.
All I have to do is say, go get a drink from the bubbler, and people know exactly what city I'm from.
Oh, really? Because I've never heard that phrase, go get a drink from the bubbler. What's a bubbler?
It's a Milwaukee thing. A bubbler is a drinking fountain.
Okay.
But only in Milwaukee.
That's so fun. Now, I've been to Milwaukee. I really like Milwaukee. I think that's a great town. I was there for a conference once, and I encourage them to keep putting conferences in places like that because it was fun to walk around. I mean, it's just a really nice town in the summer. It's
Yeah,
like,
only in this well, actually, the weather has changed considerably since I lived there. I haven't lived there since 1979, but it's considerably warmer. One weather pattern that I recently discovered was that, we always had the biggest snowstorm of the year in April, and now they very rarely get snow in April.
really?
It's climate change.
Huh. Interesting. You know, what's interesting about that is I'm going to go in April. I'm going up to Chicago for a conference, and my sister's going to meet me up there because she lives in Michigan, and she's going to cruise on over to Chicago and join me and hang out with her for a little while. So I will get to experience the April weather because I remember growing up, it was very cold
Yes,
in
it was.
April.
Mhm,
April could be pretty beastly. So I
mhm.
didn't know. I actually don't know how to dress for this trip. I have to kind of like I have to, have to check it out. So it's pretty funny. No, I'm glad we have conversations like this. I want to just let everybody know. So I was on your channel a few years ago, and it was, I think, when you were sort of new to coming out of Christianity, and you said that you said just recently when I asked you some of the influences that have impacted you were people like Aron Ra,
Mhm.
and I've never met him in person. Actually, I've never met any of the atheists you named in person. Actually, I don't think I've met any of the atheists on the internet in person. And so, I mean, on the internet, on like Twitter and places like YouTube and that. And so, and I don't know if you've met the ones I just named. So when I was at the apologetics, in case you guys didn't hear this because it was before we started, but I told Godless Granny that I had met David Wood and Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy. And I met What Do You Mean, who's John McCrae. And I met Vocab Malone in person. I missed Frank Turek, and I missed Elisa, oh shoot, what's her last name? I just forgot her last name all of a sudden. Oh, Alicia something. Shows you what my memory is terrible. But anyway, so I missed them, unfortunately. But I was able to meet the other four people, and I was pretty excited about that. So I was feeling kind of starstruck. So when you see these people in real life, what was it like? Like, did you kind of feel like, oh wow, it's so cool to put like a whole body to this head that I've seen on YouTube?
Mm, sometimes. I feel like, doing live streams is so close to the real thing, and that's why I had to think for a minute as to whether or not I'd ever met Aron Ra, because I've done several live streams with him, and I feel like I've met him, even though I actually haven't.
Hmm. So what is it about art? Because now it's funny because one of the videos that I made a long time ago, it was like a really quick video on some reasons to believe in Christianity or not believe in atheism. I forget which one it was. But anyway, Aaron picked up on that one and made a video in response to it. I think it was something that atheists can't say or something, or don't have an answer for. That's what it was. And I had to turn the comments off my video because all kinds of people came over and wanted to say just the meanest things to me. And so I just turned the comments off. And so then people who really get frustrated, they'll come to another video sometimes and they'll say, oh, you turned the comments off. You just won't respond to us. And then they'll say something like super mean again. And so you and I had interactions just this morning. We're talking about sometimes people on social media can be pretty nasty, and it does come from all sides. Like
Mhm.
you'll get it from one side or another. It's really kind of a shame that people like to take out their hostility on strangers on the in the internet. But unfortunately, we see that kind of stuff. And so what was it? Let me go back to, and I think one of the reasons why I want to have this conversation, and I asked you, is because I think it's really important that we on both sides reach across the aisle sometimes and try not to misrepresent other people and misrepresent their ideas. And so sometimes it's just a good idea to, hey, let's bring them in and chat with them and find out, like, why do you think Aron Ra's, like, what is it about Aron Ra's speeches or any of that kind of stuff that have been pretty influential for you?
It's because what he said was something that I already knew. I just didn't realize that I already knew it until I heard him say it. And here's what I mean. I have a tendency to think in a compartmentalized way. And a lot of people are like this. You see your teacher at the grocery store and you don't recognize her because she's out of context. That's not the right compartment where she belongs. And I have a tendency to think that way. And my history file and my religion file were completely different areas within my brain, and there was no bridge between those files. And what Aron Ra did was made the bridge between those files. And here's how it happened. It started when my son told me, Mom, Noah's Ark could not have happened, and it did not happen. For one thing, the poop, the methane gas that would have been generated from the poop would have killed all the animals. And I looked it up on the internet and saw that he was right. Um, there were a number of websites that all said, yeah, if you really cram that many animals into an ark like that, the poop would kill them all. And I also knew from some study of nothing in depth, but just a little bit of knowledge of agriculture, that if you have a pig farm, if you put all the pigs in the barn and close the door, the pigs will all die. And the reason is because the methane gas that they produce is so great that it would suffocate them. Pigs need a very well ventilated area. And so when you think of that in terms of the ark, you're cramming far more animals into it. And so that got me to thinking and being open-minded enough to watch the video with Aron Ra. And the first thing that hit me in that video, where it was an ark protest video that he'd done a few years ago. And the first thing that hit me was the banner that they had there. It said, "Incest and Genocide Park." And I said, oh, come on. Noah's Ark isn't about incest. I mean, oh, wait, yeah, it is. I mean, you've got one family surviving that all now have to interbreed. Yeah, I guess that was God's incest plan. And genocide? Oh, wait, yeah, it is. I mean, God wiped out everyone on the planet except this one family. I guess, yeah, that really is a genocide. And so then I started listening to what Aron said. Now, that was just a banner. That was not Aron. And Aron was talking to someone, and he said, we know that Noah's Ark didn't happen. Not just that it couldn't happen, but that it didn't happen. And we know this from biology, geology, mythology, history. And that was the moment when it hit me, when he said history. Because for the first time, I then bridged the gap between my religious thinking and what I knew from having studied history. And I knew enough about ancient Chinese history to know that no teacher or professor has ever said, okay, now in about the year 4300, all of the people in China were all killed. And there was about, a 200-year gap in which there were no people. And then the civilization slowly began to rebuild. And not only is that not true in China, that's not true anywhere on the planet. That was not the only civilization on the planet at that alleged period of time. There were people in India, there were people in South America, there were people in Great Britain, and none of them got wiped out, and suddenly, and then we have this big archaeological gap where there are no humans on the planet, and then slowly they build up, which told me that the ark was not a true story. Now, you have to back up to 1984. 1984 was the worst year of my life. I had my firstborn child was stillborn. And when that happened, I examined my faith very closely. God, if there is a God, suffocated my child in my womb. And I had to come to terms with that. And the way I came to terms with that was the Bible is the inerrant word of God. And as long as the Bible is the inerrant word of God, I will trust in God no matter what. And I did for another 35 years. But once Aron Ra showed me that the Bible is not inerrant, it is wrong about the flood, my faith shattered. Because that was the bedrock of my faith, and my faith had no longer had a foundation.
Now, let me ask you, would you say that you were a young earth creationist before?
Not at that point. There was a time when I was a young earth creationist, but I stopped being a young earth creationist as soon as I went to the Shed Aquarium, because the young earth creationists made the mistake of making a falsifiable claim. They claimed that fish cannot grow lungs. And then I went to the Shed Aquarium, and there they were, lungfish, right
Mhm.
there in front of me, swimming around,
Yeah.
fish with lungs.
It's even in Genesis 1:20 if you look at the KJV version. So it's definitely consistent with what we have. Fish,
So at
coming out of the water and
yeah, so at that point, I became an old earther.
hmm. Yeah, I've never been a young earth creationist, so I've always been the old earther. Although I have heard so many different views from people on the flood. Some people talk about when they're talking rather hyperbolic about the flood being something that's covering the entire globe. And so a lot of people think like IP, we just listened to
Yeah,
what his
he
take
says
is
it's
on
not
that.
global.
He doesn't believe it's global, he believes it's regional. And then there's of course other discussions about the age of the earth and when this all would have happened. And the other thoughts
But if
on
it wasn't global, that makes some other parts of the Bible untrue. I mean, it says that all of the people on the whole planet were wiped out. Well, obviously that wasn't
it
true.
doesn't say on the whole planet.
Well, it does say everything with the breath of life, unless you're gonna say the people outside of that region didn't breathe.
No, I'd say that I think, well, the reason I guess I'm asking this is because there are multiple ways to interpret Genesis people like IP apparently, and I just found this out relatively recently. IP has the belief that, and he looks at people like John Walton and other people and exactly how the 6 days were put together and the structure of all of that. And it's a really fascinating study of interest. But he thinks that the earth is old, but people, humanity, our modern human beings, didn't maybe start populating the earth until somewhere between 10 and 20,000 years ago. And then some people will say, well, no, we've got some studies where we see caveman evidence from, 50,000 years ago or whatever that is.
200,000 years ago.
It could be. So the thing is, what my point is, I look at the Bible and I think that my interpretation or others' interpretations of the Bible, that part could be fallible. And I try to build it from that perspective because my assumption is that it's true. And my definition of inerrancy doesn't correspond one-on-one with my interpretation being 100% correct. And so I leave it open. And I'm wondering and I'm wondering if maybe, let me just ask you this, because I think this is a good question. If Jesus Christ were to appear to you, like physically right now in the room, and just say, Kelly, let's reason together. Come, let us reason together. What would you do? Like, what would be your reaction to Jesus?
I'd say, "Who are you and what are you all about?"
Okay.
Because so much of what I learned about that was, of course, the beginning of my atheist journey, and that turned out to be only the tip of the iceberg. And once I began the journey and I started opening my mind to all of the things that I had shielded my mind from as a believer, I discovered that a whole lot of what I believed wasn't true. And, like I believed that Paul wrote, all the books that are attributed to him in the New
Mhm.
Testament. And I've since found out that the consensus, not just the outlying like the Bart Ehrmans, but the consensus of biblical scholars is that Paul didn't write Ephesians and he didn't write the pastoral letters. These are forgeries written in his name.
Yeah, I don't believe that actually at all. I
No,
believe that Paul
I
wrote
get that.
13 books of the New Testament, and I attribute it to when he even has his own, like it's written from the Paul. I think that I have heard scholars say, okay, we'll give him between 6 and 13 books, and they want to discount certain books, and some of them you just can't discount. And again, when people say consensus and scholarship, it to me it's funny because it's a lot of the consensus and scholarship comes from Protestants and doesn't come from going back in history to the early Catholics and why the Catholics put those books together and attributed them to Paul. And now as a Catholic, as a revert to Catholicism, I've looked into history and looked into some of the claims of the authorship of the Gospels and all that kind of stuff. And I see evidence coming from very, very early ancient church fathers for who authored many of these books. And I find that more compelling than recent scholarship of people who like to align with the liberal side, which I find unappealing myself. So, and possibly untrue. I don't see there is a reason to, just like even going back to the Gospels, but going beyond that, let's go back to Jesus. So you would ask him who he was, and you would ask him, basically, you'd probably say, well, why did I have these questions about the Bible?
No, I wouldn't ask that at all. I mean, I
Okay.
know why I had questions. The 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 questions are so deep, it goes down to, who even is he? Because The Bible can't even agree as to who he is. Historically, Jesus doesn't fit. Like the Quirinius problem. The Gospel of Matthew has Jesus being born in Bethlehem to a couple who lives in Bethlehem, but the Gospel of Luke has him being born during the time that Quirinius is governor of Syria, which didn't happen until 6 CE. And it talks about the first census of Quirinius, which happened in 6 CE. Judea was annexed into Rome in 6 CE, and that's why that was the first census and the first taxation. But Matthew has Jesus born while Herod the Great was alive. Well, Herod the Great died 10 years before Quirinius became governor. Now, I know there's the Christian apologetic that says, well, maybe possibly Quirinius was governor twice, but according to Dr. Richard Carrier, that never happened. He said Roman emperors were too afraid of a power base to allow a person to be governor of the same province twice. They might allow someone to be a governor of two different provinces, giving them two different governorships, but they would not make them governor of the same province two different times.
Now that's, I can say it's not just a Christian apologetic that makes that claim, because you have a whole bunch of assumptions packed in there. And this all comes from Josephus. And so the estimates of 6 CE, we do know that, yes, and I would call it actually AD, Anno Domini, but we have the assumptions of 6 CE. It's not just that. There's a person called Steinman in 2009 who's published a very interesting article in a peer-reviewed journal that talks about alternate dating. And there's multiple other people who've also, DeLuke and some others, have looked at other types of dating. There's an assumption that Jesus was born in either 4 or 6 BC. In recent scholarship, that's been refuted, and it's more like it's about either 2 or 3 BC, and that's consistent with what the early church fathers said. And that
Which
Herod,
still after Herod died.
Well, there's an assumption that Herod died in 4 based on a very weak eclipse. But actually, they've looked now in the current scholarships looking at very strong eclipse that occurred in 1 BC. And that is when they're saying that Herod died, because the time in 4 BC between the eclipse and the Passover and this whole calendar of events that had to have occurred didn't give enough time for the events that were listed under Josephus for all these things for Herod to do. However, in 1 BC, there was a much bigger length of time between the eclipse and the Passover, giving Herod much more time to do the actions that they said. And so the scholarship now is looking at that. And it's also looking at timing of Quirinius as far as having, because Luke mentioned it is in a way that you could have construed that there had been a census that had occurred prior to that. And I think that that's just something. So there's a lot of reasons.
Well, okay, here's the problem with that historically. Even if you change the date slightly, when Herod died, his kingdom was divided among his 4 sons, one of which was Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas was such a terrible ruler. He messed up so badly that the people appealed to Caesar to appoint them a new governor. And that's when Quirinius was appointed governor. And so it is not possible, even if you change the dates around, for Quirinius to be governor while Herod is still alive, because Quirinius took over for Herod's son, who inherited after Herod died.
And just again, going back to what I've said, there's also an inscription that they found that indicates that Quirinius was a governor prior to that. So I know Richard Carrier might not believe that people can be a governor twice.
I've heard
Richard Carrier's scholarship is quite
there's
dubious.
a lot of dispute over that inscription.
So, well, so anyway, the bottom line is I have one view, you have a different view. I believe you actually look at Luke and read it first and then read Matthew second, the accounts can fit together like a glove. I think that there's an account that people are assuming, for example, when Herod went and killed all the children under 2 years old, the reason why he chose the 2-year window is because he was told that of the timing of Jesus's birth. And so a lot of this stuff, I've made videos on this, and I'm sure you probably have too, and I've made blogs on this. And so I just think that there's quite an interesting way to put it all together without some of the assumptions that people have packed into Matthew and Luke. So if you guys go out there and just read Matthew and Luke, assume that the whole thing's under a 2-year window, and it all fits together like a glove. First Luke, then Matthew. It fits together chronologically.
So how do you get Quirinius being governor at the same time as Herod when Quirinius took over for Herod's son. That still doesn't work.
It's if Quirinius were governor, people have estimated that it could be going back all the way to like 11 BC, as far as when Quirinius was governor. Prior to that,
Except at that time he was in Galatia fighting the Herodians.
so
He was a legate.
let me look at. Well, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go find my blog and try to find it because it's been a couple of years since I wrote the blog. But I can say when I did map it out chronologically, it worked out pretty well. And so I
All
can
right,
just say that. I mean, going beyond that.
that historical problem. Let's look at the problems with the resurrection.
Okay.
According to Mark, the women went to the tomb. An angel told them that Jesus died, or that Jesus rose, and they left, and they were so afraid that they told no one. End of story. No one knows about the gospel. In Matthew's version, the women go to the tomb. The angel tells them. They go back and tell the disciples. The disciples believe them, and the message from Jesus was to meet them in Galilee. And so the disciples go to Galilee and meet Jesus in Galilee. In John's version, the women get the message from the angel. They go and tell the disciples, and they leave with great joy. They're not afraid in this version. But the disciples don't believe the message, and they go and check for themselves. And after checking for themselves, then they are able to see Jesus. Now, in the Luke version, the women go to the tomb. They are told the message. And then as they are on the road to Emmaus, Jesus appears to them, but they don't realize it's him. And when they are having dinner with him, they realize it's him. He suddenly disappears. Then they go back to Jerusalem that same day, and he appears to the 12, and he tells them to remain there in Jerusalem until Pentecost, when they receive the Holy Spirit. Now, if the disciples remained in Jerusalem, as Jesus told them, how could they have also seen him in Galilee? The stories don't fit together.
There have been multiple people who've put those four accounts together. And
yeah, I had
can
one
say,
Christian tell me that the disciples met Jesus in Galilee, then came back for the road to Emmaus, which would mean they had to run 80 miles an hour to get to Galilee, meet Jesus for breakfast, run 80 miles an hour back to Jerusalem in order to meet him on the road to Emmaus that same day.
those were different disciples. On the road to Emmaus, of course, that was the disciple Clopas and somebody who was with Clopas, and they assumed that was probably Clopas's wife, the other Mary. So
okay, but
let me
still appearing to the 11 in the upper room, or not the upper room, but in that closed room that same evening after they got back from Emmaus.
So here's how I have reconciled it. And I've got my blog now in front of me, so I could share the blog, but I've reconciled it basically. There's a lot of assumptions packed into it. So here's what I have. While it was still dark, Mary Magdalene traveled to the tomb where she found it to be empty. So she went to tell the disciples, John, and those who had been with Jesus, wept, as reported in Mark. At dawn, according to Matthew and Luke, just after sunrise, according to Mark, she returned to the tomb with the other women, including Mary, the mother of John, and Salome, where they found the angels, according to Mark. Some of the women returned to the apostles and told them about the angels, while Mary Magdalene may have lingered. At this point, the apostles had reports from multiple women that the tomb was empty and/or angels had appeared to them, according to Luke. These came from Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Salome, Joanna, and others. So Peter and John ran to the tomb and confirmed it was empty, according to John. Mary Magdalene started crying in front of the angels she saw in the tomb, according to John. Then Jesus appeared to her, telling her to go back to the apostles to let them know about him. Mary, the mother of James, joined her, and they left, according to Matthew. Jesus suddenly appeared again. Perhaps this was Mary, the mother of James's benefit, for Mary, mother of James's benefit. Mary Magdalene then reported to the apostles that she had seen the risen Lord, according to Mark and John. And then so you have the reports now following from Matthew 28:11-15, which basically talks about what they saw. And then Jesus appeared to Clopas and another disciple, according to Mark and Luke, Luke, on the road to Emmaus, and soon shared passages about himself from the Old Testament, according to Luke. But these disciples told the 11, and the 11 didn't believe them, according to Mark. Jesus rebuked the 11 for their unbelief, according to Mark. He later instructed them to make disciples of all nations, according to Matthew and Mark, and told them that whoever believes and is baptized would be saved, according to Mark. And so I just think it gets put together when I think people pack assumptions into some of this stuff that require you to put it together. And so I think there was some back and forth, and there's multiple ways to reconcile those accounts. Mine is just one, but I've seen other people reconcile them. I think what you might be looking for is, and I think other people are looking for it, they have their own assumptions. My assumption is that it's true, and I figure out how to reconcile it. Your assumption is that it's false, and you think that there are contradictions that I don't see.
No, that's not it at all. I recognize that you assume that it's true, and so you have to try to make it be true. And I look at it and I say, okay, given the data I have, what is the most reasonable conclusion from it? I don't start from the assumption that it's false. I start from the data and look for what is the most reasonable conclusion. And the most reasonable conclusion to me is that we've got 4 people who heard stories about Jesus and wrote these stories down. And the stories were similar, but not exactly the same, because there wasn't any Holy Spirit or God telling them what to write. If there was a God that was telling them what to write, I would expect the stories to have more agreement.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I don't see it quite like that. I'm like, if I read 4 people's accounts of some events that occurred, like maybe 4 people reporting on 9/11 or something like that, I would expect the accounts to each be tweaked slightly for that person's opinions and that.
Correct. I would too. But if all 4 of them are all getting their information from the same source.
So that's an assumption on your part.
Oh, so the Holy Spirit wasn't inspiring this?
I believe the Holy Spirit was inspiring it, but I think that I guess I was assuming that you're referring to Q. Maybe you're not referring to
No,
Q.
I was referring to the alleged Holy Spirit inspiring all of this.
Okay. No, I do believe the Holy Spirit inspired, but I also believe that the message came to Mark through Peter. I believe the message came to Matthew because he was a tax collector who traveled with Jesus. So his
You're in
unique.
an extreme minority on that view.
Well, it's not actually. It's a Catholic perspective, and
Yes,
Catholics
it's a
are
Catholic
the
perspective, but
majority.
it's not a
Well, that's the majority
scholarly
of Christians in the world.
perspective. It's not a
That's the
scholarly
majority of
perspective.
Christians in the world. So
Yeah.
just to
So
point that
you're
out, I mean, we
appealing
have
to
over 1 billion
popularity.
Christians in
Popular view,
Catholicism.
therefore
So,
it's true. I'm sorry, but popularity doesn't make things true.
well, it's not. You just used that same argument when you said scholarly consensus.
No, that's very different, because a scholarly consensus is what has been determined, or not determined, but has been concluded from people who have studied the matter.
Yeah.
Popularity is what do the general population believe. There's a huge difference there.
Well,
And
it's
being an
I'm
academic yourself, you should recognize that a scholarly consensus is not the same as a popular survey among the students.
and that's not exactly what I said. I didn't say a popular survey among students. Now let me just tell you what the traditional beliefs are, going back to Jerome and the other people who compiled the Bible initially. Of course, we have Matthew, the tax collector. He's the only one who uniquely reports certain things in there, like, for example, the drachma and the fish and the event with Peter. And a tax collector would be uniquely aware of that. We have Mark, who shares information about Peter that we don't hear in the other accounts. He's also referenced in the other parts of the Bible outside of the Gospels. We have Luke, who has traveled with Paul and starts reporting on himself in the first hand starting in Acts 15. And then we have John, who was a beloved disciple of Jesus. Again, traditionally, going back to the very early ancient church fathers, all of these books were attributed to these 4 and nobody else. There's no other attributions to anybody else in the first few hundred years.
In the first, I can't remember exactly how long, but in the very beginning, there's no attributions of these books to anyone. The earliest writings about the Gospels do not refer to them as having the names that have been put on them later.
Okay, that's unfortunately not correct.
Yeah, it is.
I'm going to give you some specifics. I'm going to give you some quotes.
That's from Bart Ehrman.
So I know Bart Ehrman has he's got his opinions, and I don't agree with
And
them.
he's also considered the premier New Testament scholar in the world today.
No, he's not. You say considered by some, he's certainly not considered by all to be the premier New
I
Testament
would agree with
scholar.
that. Obviously not everyone thinks that. But, the biggest problem with seeing Matthew as being the tax collector is that first, he copies verbatim what some of Mark's material. And second, when he describes the meeting between Matthew and Jesus, that's written in the third person, not the first person. And further, that is one of the passages that is copied verbatim from Mark. Why would someone writing their own testimony copy someone else's version of their testimony? That makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't believe that Mark was the first gospel. I go back to what the ancient church fathers said about Matthew being the first gospel, and that's why we have the listing in the way it is today. And
Well,
so I believe Matthew was written before Mark, and I don't agree with some of the scholarship that has argued against that, including that from William Lane Craig. I don't agree with him on that, and I've
mhm.
written why. But I just wanted to point out a couple of things, just as far as the ancient people who've said this. So going back to some of the ancient people, Ignatius made references. He included quotes from these Matthew, Luke, Acts, Romans, First Corinthians, Ephesians, Colossians, and First Thessalonians. We've got Irenaeus also giving support. Irenaeus mentions Polycarp, who studied under John, but he also, let me just get some other quotes here. Hold on one second. Papias, the bishop of Hierapolis, who was born around 60, lived till 130, said, quote, Mark, being the interpreter of Peter, whatsoever he remembered, he wrote accurately, but not, however, in that order that these things were spoken or done by our Lord. Eusebius also mentions James. Polycarp, who lived between 69 and 156. In his letter to the Philippians, he included quotes from Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, Galatians, Ephesians, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Philippians, Thessalonians, whatever it is. Anyway, Timothy, First Peter, First John, Third John, and then Justin Martyr, who lived between 100 and 165, also included Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Revelation in his words, in his dialogue. And so we have Clement of Alexandria and Irenaeus named all four Gospels in the 2nd century: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Clement of Alexandria lived between 150 and 215, and Irenaeus was born in 130. I don't know when he died, but I'm just pointing out these are attributions to those four authors that came very early on. So that's anyway, I don't, the thing is, Godless Granny, I think it'd be more fun if we just, I think it's good to get, I think you and I both obviously have very different opinions on the Gospels, different opinions on the Bible and its authenticity. I'm not going to change your opinion and you're not going to change mine. I'll be honest there. I don't think we're going to change the audience's opinions. And I want to say hi to everyone who's in the audience, because we have a lot of, and I don't want to even say both sides anymore. I'd like to just say we have a lot of nice people in the audience who might agree with your side, some might agree with my side, but we've got, like, I see Phil, Captive Desk, Utopia Busters, Slam RN. I just want to say hi to you guys.
Can I make
Yeah.
one point here?
Yeah.
Okay. Here is my biggest problem, and it's not directly to any of these points. It comes down to divine hiddenness. If there really is a heaven and a hell, and what we believe about these are so important that we will be tortured for an eternity if we don't have the correct beliefs. If this really was true and this really was this important, I would think that an all-powerful, omniscient God would be capable of communicating this to us in a manner that is clear to everyone and is abundantly clear, such that there is not different denominations of Christians. That, Jesus prayed that all believers would be in unity, and either God told him no, or God wasn't able to answer this prayer because they are not in unity. But if there really was a God that really thought this was important, he should be able to communicate this to us in a way that everyone could understand it.
I think that's a very good argument, and you feel like it goes to, and then you have God responding to that argument in the first book of, I mean, in Romans, basically saying that everyone's been given this information, the general revelation, and we can see that in the cosmos, and we can see it in nature. And I feel like that. I mean, I
And yet
know people
and
hate
yet
when
Christianity has never sprung up spontaneously anywhere where it wasn't preached. And if looking at the
that's a very
trees,
strong statement. How can you be certain of that?
okay, because there's no evidence of it. You give me evidence of Christianity erupting spontaneously in a place where nobody's ever heard of Christianity, and I will take that back.
Do you mean spontaneous with respect to no missionaries, nobody else like that coming
Right,
into the place and making
right.
people?
You know,
So somebody be receiving a revelation from Jesus without understanding. Because I mean, you probably know this, but why I'm a Christian? One of the reasons I've myself circled about, looked at the Eastern faith, did all that kind of stuff, is because I sincerely believe that I've had experiences with Jesus. I feel like
yes, but you've also heard about Jesus all your life.
I did. And
Mhm.
I hadn't even
So
looked
that's
into the
not
resurrection for.
spontaneous.
Well, no, I'm not saying. I'm saying I would probably have to go back and look through history and try to find, have there been examples where other people, where Jesus has appeared to other people, or Jesus has made himself aware. And I would guess there probably is, although I'm not thinking of them right off the bat. If anyone in the audience wants to
Oh,
give
no, no,
thought of that.
no, Jesus doesn't even appear. People just look at the trees and suddenly they know that Jesus is the savior of the world. It's
Well,
never happened.
well, and I do look at the trees. I mean, I don't think that that's a bad argument. I look outside at nature, and I feel like
Yes, but you
you've got a
already
very
know the whole
compelling
story.
case.
I'm
Well,
saying
no,
no one who has never heard of Jesus will look at a tree and say, "Oh, Jesus is the savior of the
well,
world."
no, they wouldn't know. It's kinda like when Paul
Okay,
talked to
so
the
that's the
Ephesians
failure
and he
of
said,
that argument.
"You've been worshiping an unknown God and you don't know who the God is." And so
All
there are
right.
yeah,
So
so
God has not made it this plan of salvation and the need to know Jesus plain just by making trees.
well, looking at the trees, we're given a general revelation that there is a God, there is a creator, and I think the special revelation comes from the understanding of Christianity. And
Okay,
so
right, exactly.
well, let me
So
go
it is
back
not
to.
made plain to everyone just by the fact that there are trees on the planet.
Well, I think a lot of it is, so we have evidence of a general revelation. That's what I was talking about in the book of Romans. So we're
Mhm.
given evidence that in the stars, in the planet, in the nature around us. But then we're also given brains and free will and the ability to reject any of the messages that we see. So I can look at the trees and say one thing, you look at the trees and you say another thing. Some of my
Exactly.
faith is based on faith. Some of it is based on my own personal experiences and
And
evidence.
faith is a gift of God, is it not?
Uh, yeah, by the grace of God, I'm given
So
a
if
certain
I don't
level of
have faith,
knowledge.
that's not my fault, that's God's fault for not giving me that gift.
Well, you have to actively seek. You have to
And
actively
you're
seek.
going to tell me that I didn't?
No, I'm not. I don't know if
I
you I
was a
don't know you well
believer
enough
for
to know if you have
42
or not.
years. If anyone sought, I sought. There is nothing that I didn't do to seek. I mean, I prayed, I read my Bible, I went to church, I read the books, I went on the retreats, I went on mission trips. I was a church librarian, I sang in the choir, I taught VBS, I taught women's Bible studies, I taught, adult Bible study groups. If there is anything I could possibly have done to seek God more than what I did in those 42 years, please tell me what it was.
Well, you did it sounds like you did do a lot of things. So I don't see, I don't know the inside of your mind, and I do know that you were upset about, and I don't blame you. My gosh, what happened to you in 1984 is absolutely tragic. I didn't get to say that, but I am so sorry about that. That happened to my cousin, and it is probably, that has to be the most painful thing that a mother could ever experience. I mean, honestly,
The worst part was carrying the baby dead for 3 weeks.
oh,
I carried a dead fetus inside of me for 3 weeks.
oh my gosh, awful. I'm terribly sorry about that. I had a miscarriage in my very first pregnancy, was a miscarriage, and that even though the baby was so small, I didn't see, the heartbeat was very weak, and then the baby died, and it was I just remember bawling, and I never knew if I'd be able to have kids because I was old. I was old with my first two kids. I had my first one at 36 and my second at 37,
Mm.
and so the one before that, I was relatively old. I didn't know if I was going to be blessed with children. I had no idea. And I remember when the first one passed in the miscarriage, that was insanely difficult for me. Like I was a basket case, so I can't even, and I asked myself kind of like what you did. It's like, well, why did God allow that? And I just, in my answer to that, and just like what you must have said back in 1984 was, I have to have faith. He has to have a purpose. I have to realize that this happened, but he's got a bigger picture.
Mhm.
And going back to what you said about heaven and hell, I never really knew how to understand hell. And I was never raised in a church that clubbed it over your head. Like honestly, I was raised in the Catholic Church. Then I was in the Baptist church for 10 years. Then I came back to Catholicism. But even in the Baptist,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I find
oh,
that funny because my mother was raised Catholic, and one of her biggest problems with the church was being clubbed over the head with hell.
yeah, it's the strangest thing because it honestly never happened. And I'm not trying to, I'll name the church. It was Holy Angels Catholic Church up in Aurora, Illinois. They never, I don't even remember the topic of hell even coming up, as strange as that might sound. I definitely remember heaven. And I definitely remember silly little songs we could sing, like if the devil doesn't like it, he can sit on attack. Ouch! Sit on, like I remember a lot of that kind of stuff. And then even when I went to the Baptist church for 10 years, now they did mention it briefly, but it was never like, you never felt like, everyone's like some of these preachers that I hear out there. And many times, unfortunately, they turn out to be phonies and they're out there screaming about hell. And I think to myself, how do you know you're not going to be there? If you're such a phony, you do these you say one thing on the one day and then we see you having sex with some stranger on the, like it's the craziest thing. So one thing you said on Twitter that I kind of wanted to bring up is you said, there are some creepy Christians out there, unfortunately. Ravi Zacharias, I used to think the guy was just an amazing guy. And then he dies and we find out that he was busy, molesting women in a massage parlor. And I think, oh my gosh, what is like, ew, and so yes, there's
And
bad
he's not
Christians.
alone.
I know, it's horrifying.
And
But
the Catholic Church is one of the worst offenders.
well, I tell you what, I left the Catholic Church in the 90s because I didn't like the way the Pope hadn't handled the stuff properly. I still don't think the Pope has handled the stuff properly. I've found my way back, not because of the Pope, and not because, you'll never see me say anything about the Pope. Very, very rarely I'll say something about the Pope, I should say. But the reason I'm back is because I firmly believe that Jesus said to Peter, on this rock I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail. That is one of the reasons. So I feel like I look at like Peter Kreeft and he says, all the failings of the Catholic Church, it's a miracle the thing is still around after all centuries of failings, unfortunately. But I also feel that the doctrines,
And the
Bible,
fraud
all
of
the
Mother
good stuff
Teresa is absolutely horrifying, and that's still ongoing.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with what the persecution of Mother Teresa. I think it's like, talk about having a plank in your eye and trying to judge somebody else. So I don't agree with Christopher Hitchens' musings on that. So that's all I would say. And I like that's actually, but going back to heaven and hell, because I do want to talk about that. Actually, let me go back to tell you what I've heard some people say that you might find interesting. And I don't know if you ever heard me say this. As far as heaven and hell. So it's like according to a lot of Catholic people today and some saints and some other people who consider themselves visionaries or that sort of thing, according to that, and this goes back a few hundred years, but at some point we're all going to receive an illumination of conscience. And this is this idea where you are able to see yourself through the eyes of Jesus and how he would look at you and see you. And when you receive this illumination of conscience, you yourself decide where you want to go at the end of your life. Like you decide.
That's where I pivoted to when I first reasoned my way into the divine hiddenness problem. Is that there's more to the story than just what's in the Bible. And that after we die, we'll come to some kind of a place where we come to know. And that's really more of a position of universalism. That everybody will get a choice after death, after they're given full informed consent. And yeah, that certainly would make more sense than the story we get from Christianity.
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is actually coming from Christianity. So it's just this idea that you're given an illumination of conscience. You see yourself through Jesus's eyes, and then you choose. So now some people, even at that point, will choose, like they would choose to be without God. They don't want to be with God, and it would be hell for them if they were forced into heaven. And so they choose to be without him. And so they go into a different realm, which is without God, without the light. And so that's basically what Christianity.
I don't believe there is an afterlife.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, I don't think you do, because you're an atheist. So, yeah. I know you don't believe. That's a good. So let me just ask, we've got a lot of people in the audience, and I know I've seen some names and faces here that I haven't, not faces, seen some names and images here of people that I haven't seen in such a long time. And I think they're here purely for you, Kelly. So,
oh yeah. Captive Desk is here for me.
Yeah.
And so is Iron Charioteer.
Now, Otangelo might be here. Otangelo's been written. I'm just going to mention Otangelo's book because he always.
I know Otangelo.
He's got a book on the Shroud of Turin. I think he's got a book on the Shroud of Turin, and I've had him on my channel before. Shiami, I want to say hi to Shiami. Hi, I don't want to miss anybody. Phil B, Slam RN. Who else do we have? I always feel like when I go into people's chats, I'm kind of like, it makes me happy when they call you out and say, I see you in the chat. So all you guys in the chat, want to say hi to everybody. If you guys have a question for Godless Granny, I know I told her about an hour. I was thinking we'd be on for an hour or so. That seemed, maybe give or take a few minutes, maybe even an hour, 15 minutes if she's willing to keep chatting. But if you guys have a question for Godless Granny, I'd love it if you asked it. Hi, Road Squatch. Is that one of your friends?
I don't know Road Squatch.
I don't either. So yeah, Otangelo, long time no see. Hope you're well, Iron Chariot. So you guys have, if you guys have questions, Godless Granny, do you have any questions that you want to ask me? I think I've asked you a few questions. You have anything you?
Nope. No?
Well, I can say one of the things that I'll just stir you. Oh, and I see Craig Reed was in here a little earlier. I forgot to say hi to him too. I wanted to say one of the things that I like about you and that I found on social media is you're a very level-headed person. And if you guys want to listen to someone who's level-headed, who's a reasonable person, I've only seen you be kind to people. I've never seen you, like, you talk about how other people have heaped abuse on you on Twitter, and I've seen people heap abuse on me too. So I get that. I totally get it. I just block them all. I don't have, that's my reaction. But yeah, okay, I have here's one.
One of the funnier ones was just a couple of days ago. I blocked one for saying, "You are a supercomputer, you imbecile."
Supercomputer.
But, okay, make up your mind. Which one am I? A supercomputer or an imbecile? Can't be both.
Oh wait, I got some questions coming in. This is perfect. Okay, first one here is from Iron Charioteer. This is a very good question because you mentioned Richard Carrier. So are you a mythicist or a historicist? What do you believe about Jesus?
I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not all the way to mythicism, but I still kind of think that Jesus was historical, but I think the evidence is far more sketchy than I originally had thought.
Okay. And so now I obviously, you know what I think, but I won't even tell you what I think. So here's another one. Most of what you cited as difficulties for you so far historical. What about more fundamental arguments for whether God exists or not? That's where my biggest problems lie.
I agree, Phil, because really it's the divine hiddenness problem is the reason why I don't believe God exists at all. Because, and that's where I reasoned my way. That's what I reasoned my way into. And what I did was I was reflecting on the life of Paul. And it suddenly dawned on me that Paul had a personal revelation from God. Why? Because God wanted him. Why doesn't God give everyone a personal revelation? Does that mean God does not want them? And at the time, I was a Calvinist. And so the Calvinist position is that only the called are able to receive God. And if you are not called, you not only don't receive God, but you aren't even able to do it. And that thinking for the first time made me think about all of the people that were not called and realizing that this isn't just a few, this is the vast majority. And if God chose from before the foundations of the earth to reject the vast majority of humanity and create them for the purpose of sending them to hell, then that is an evil God. and I would want nothing to do with such a God. Oh, Digital Hammurabi is here.
Yeah, I want to say, well, actually, as far as Calvinism, I reject Calvinism. I fully reject it. I think actually Calvinism is what led Tyler Vela to the same opinion that we're to the same place where you are right now. I think it's a corruption of the original message from God. I believe in the tulip at all. But anyway, I want to say hi to Digital Hammurabi. I haven't seen you in forever. And I did ask Godless Granny before we start. I don't know if I asked it when we were on air or not, but I asked if she knew where you went, because I haven't seen you on X in a while. And you and the other guy, Thomas Westbrook, haven't seen you guys. But anyway, so he's got a question for you. Can you instantiate your ultimacy of necessary preconditionals of the, wow, holy cow, he's got a lot of big words here, lots of syllables. Okay, can you instantiate your ultimacy of necessary preconditionals of the foundational grounding of all possible impossibilities for all being? Where is that coming from? That sounds like it's
that looks like it came from Mr. Deity.
Is that a YouTube channel?
I would guess that somebody asked Digital Hammurabi that question. My answer to that question is no. I cannot.
Instantiate. Yeah, I was like, what? I'm reading it and I'm like, you're trying to think 10-syllable question. Okay, we got another one here from Iron Charioteer. How do you get through the day without believing in Jesus?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because that brings up two rather funny things. One of the funniest things is when I stopped believing, one thing I never expected was that I needed new clothes, because almost every t-shirt I owned said Jesus, or it had the name of a church on it, or it was from some kind of church event. And it's,
Wow.
I don't believe this stuff anymore. I need new clothes.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah. The other thing though is the one thing that I feared when I lost my faith was going outside and seeing nature, because I thought all my life I've gone outside and I've looked at nature and I've said, wow, look what God has made. And I'm never going to be able to do that again. And I was almost afraid to go outside. And the first time I went outside after I stopped believing, and I looked around and I said, holy mackerel, look at all of this that just came about through natural processes. This is absolutely amazing. And it was incredible that I didn't lose my marvel at nature. It actually became much greater, because I now realize that this was all natural.
That's interesting. So I've got two more questions here I see coming in here. So everyone just loves asking you questions. I'm so glad people are doing that. So this one says, this is Otangelo. He says, if not God, what alternative cause explains our existence? Now you're just saying kind of what you just answered right there. You're saying natural cause. After all, our universe cannot exist without a beginning.
I am not certain that our universe can't exist without a beginning. I do not know what caused the beginning of the universe. I will fully admit that. And I have read several different theories, and not all of those theories have a beginning. One of the theories is the bounce theory, that the universe goes back and forth from the state we're in now, and I'm not sure if the opposite state is like an antimatter state. I'm not really sure, but that's not my field, and I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, I got to get Kip. I guess Kip is blocked on my channel. I didn't realize I blocked him, so I'm going to take a second here and flip over and try to find where Kip is blocked and try to undo that really quickly.
Okay.
Sorry, Kip. I must have blocked him a while ago. But I'll just say what I consider a good argument, and then
Do you want me to read? Do you want me to read the question so you can work on unblocking Kip?
Yeah, let me go find.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is a question for SJ.
Well, it says I consider, actually, I think Jesus Christ is to me the strongest argument for God's existence. That's just what I think. I'm going to go try to find Kip here. I'm going to see how to do this on my channel.
Okay. My response to
Yeah.
Jesus Christ is the strongest existence for God. First of all, I'm certainly not convinced that Jesus Christ was God. If Jesus existed, and I still kind of think he did, he was a person just like other people. I think the stories about him were greatly embellished. I think he's very similar to King Arthur, that there were a lot of stories about him that eventually got collected together and put into the book that we now call the Bible.
Okay, I'm trying to find where I've oh, there, hidden users. Oh gosh, okay, yeah.
The Kentucky atheist says that's not an argument. Saying you believe in God because of the existence of Jesus is not an argument.
It's my personal experiences. Let me just unblock. I realize I actually have kind of a lot of people blocked here. I didn't realize I have all these people blocked. Okay. Unblock Kip, unblock Nathaniel Robinson, unblock. Wow, I didn't even block some of these people. I don't recall blocking them. This is crazy. Okay, let me just save that. Sorry. Seems like I'm rather unforgiving here. I've got all these people blocked. It's just like, oops. I'm gonna have to go back and unblock some more. I had actually kind of a little pile of people who are unblocked. Can't talk right now. Okay, let's see. What else do we have here? See if we have other questions. Do you see any other questions coming in here, Granny?
I usually star the questions when I'm looking.
Yeah, let me just see if great to see you. That's noble. I will be swimming maybe next time. New comments. Let's see if we can get down here. Okay, yeah, I definitely unblocked Kip. If he has a question, it sounds like he must have had something to say. I do want to say I've had Digital Hammurabi on my channel before. Kip says he's never blocked anyone on the channel. So now, yeah, I have. Okay, I definitely have. But now I unblocked you, Kip. We'll just start all over again and renew our lovely relationship, because I know how much you enjoy my channel. I'm surprised he's here, actually. But he's here because of you, Godless Granny. So you got a little fan club who all came over here.
Yep.
So is there anything we haven't really talked about today that you think we should still kind of dive into? And if anyone, again, if you guys have more questions, I can certainly put them out here. Actually, I didn't mention Justin. I said I didn't say Justin Martyr cites the gospel authors by name. I said he quotes from the gospel authors. I just want to clarify what I said in case Irenaeus cites them by name. So that was just a little clarity there. Okay, here we go. We got another one. Question for Gigi. What were the social and family consequences? That's a really good question. Of leaving the faith. Did I read that right? Do you face resistance or unpleasantness?
Yeah. For me, it was not a big deal because my family has always been half and half. And so I just left one camp and joined the other camp. And religion has always been a topic in our family that's not been talked about a whole lot because there was so much division. The one person that was kind of a bit of a surprise was my sister, who is Catholic. And we never really talked much about religion, just because even as a Protestant, my beliefs were so different from hers. And, she was welcome to her beliefs. But when I became an atheist, I was really surprised that she was offended that I wore a Godless Engineer t-shirt one day.
You wore a Godless, and you have a Godless Engineer t-shirt.
It has his picture. It says, "What's up, heathens?"
Are you serious? Oh my gosh. So is he selling t-shirts on his fan club page or something?
No, Teespring.
Teespring?
You can get Godless Granny t-shirts on Teespring too. I didn't bring any of my Godless Granny merch with me at the moment, but yeah, you can get coffee mugs. I have a Godless Granny coffee mug.
Wow. And
they say, "Live your life."
Live your life. Yeah. Well, okay, here we go. This is a good question. If somebody leaves the faith, does it affect how you feel towards them or feel about them? To be honest, if someone I know leaves the faith, I'm trying to think if there's accidentally hit that brainless. I actually think John, I've been on John's channel before, Godless Engineer. I think he's a pretty decent guy, to be honest. I don't think he's a bad guy. As far as if somebody left the faith around me, that's a really good question. If my kids did, I'd be absolutely heartbroken. I pray for them all the time, and I pray for God to protect them every single day. And to be honest, when you guys are going to think this is the craziest thing, but when I go to church, the very best time for me to go to church is right after I go to confession. So I go to confession once a month on Saturdays. And I like to go to the service right after that, because I know that that's when I'm the cleanest and the purest that I could possibly be. And that's when I say my deepest prayers. And I pray for the atheists that I know on social media. And so I've named many of you guys before in my prayers. I pray that God's going to open your eyes, and so long as you are willing to have your eyes opened. And I pray that you end up we end up meeting in person in heaven. That's what I pray for. And I mean, I'm not joking around. And I've named quite a few atheists that maybe I've even seemed hostile with over the years in those prayers, also knowing that I'm not a flawless person. I make tons of errors, and I've made tons of errors. But I think that's like the perfect time to pray for people. It's like, that's all I got to say. So I wouldn't treat them differently. Instead, I'd probably elevate my prayers for them.
B.S. Lewis is here.
Have I been clickbaited? What does that mean? Oh, okay. What, Aron Ra? I think people like the chat. Oh, actually, okay, you guys, now that you're here, let me just say something. When I was at this conference last week, or earlier this week, I should say, I met What Do You Meme? And he gave these really good tips for blowing up a YouTube channel. And one of them, it wasn't to have a clickbait question in your, like I used to say stuff like coffee talk or conversation with so-and-so. Those aren't the curious things. You actually, according to What Do You Meme, is John McCrae, super nice guy, unbelievably kind. According to him, one of the best things you can do for your video title is to somehow elicit people's curiosity. And so if you ask a question like, like I asked Aron Ra's sales pitch, like, actually I did I even ask you that? What was it about Aron Ra's arguments that convinced you? You did say you listened to him, but I don't know if we actually got into the specifics.
Yeah, we did. And like I
Okay.
said, it wasn't really an argument. It was that he bridged what I already knew. It was that when I listened to him speaking,
Okay,
and he
okay,
said that the ark not only couldn't happen but didn't happen, he bridged that gap between what I knew about history and what I knew about the Bible. Two
Okay,
things that
that
I
was
had
it.
just never put together before.
So it wasn't, because I remember you saying also, it wasn't like you also, I think one of the things that Aron Ra is strong in that I've heard from even another scientist. So Cy Gart has said that Aron Ra is very good with evolution and understanding the scientific understanding of biology. And so it wasn't really that so much. It was more the history that was. Okay. Yeah.
I had to then go and learn the biology. And that was something that was interesting, is once my faith failed, I tried to start listening to some of what Aron Ra had to say on biology, and I couldn't even understand him because I didn't have the vocabulary. So what I did was then I first started watching Pelagia, because Pelagia was more my speed, and Pelagia and I come from very similar backgrounds, and so I could understand him better. And Vice Rhino would explain the concepts at a more simple level. And once I got the vocabulary and the more simple, then I could move on to Aron Ra and understand what he was saying.
Well, that brings up my next question. I guess we'll maybe, you want to go to like maybe 1:15 or 12:15 your time? Does that seem?
Sure.
Because I have this other question. I'm getting on an interview this afternoon with CRU, the Campus Crusade. So that's like, but that's not till 2:30.
I was in Crew in 1979.
Yeah. That's I've given
until they
speeches.
decided they'd had enough of me. Even as a believer, they didn't want me.
Oh no! I've given a speech. I have given a keynote address for them before. Anyway, that's later on today, so that's a little bit later. But I did want to ask you. You've mentioned Godless Engineer. I know you've watched his channel, Aron Ra, Pelagia, Vice Rhino. You met some of these guys in person. You met Josh Bowen in person. Josh, she called you out earlier. If you're still here, she mentioned that she met you in Texas. You said Texas, right?
No, Indiana.
Oh, Indiana. Okay. So yeah, you were met. And so I'm just wondering now, which channels, are there any Christian channels? Because you got a lot of atheist channels you're listening to, but are there any Christian channels that you might still entertain?
I watch a lot of Christian content primarily for the response to it. I watch Sean McDowell, who I think is one of the more honest apologists out there. And part of the reason I look at him is because his dad had a lot of influence on my faith. I look at J. Warner Wallace, who I consider to be a complete joke, because
Really? I like him.
because he misrepresents so much of what goes on in a courtroom. And a lot of my content is pointing out how, there's one video he did where he says, these are the 4 questions that are the jury instructions in California on what to believe on witnesses, is how to accept witness testimony. And what he put up, the 4 things that he put up, only one of them was actually in the California jury instructions. The other were I don't know where he got them from. He's also
Because you were a lawyer in a past life, right?
yes.
Okay, so you have that, because I just want to let people know why you're, like, how you actually have a position where you can compliment or comment on his.
Check up on the jury instructions.
Yeah, because I wouldn't know jury instructions. That's not my background at all.
And what's really deeply disappointing is that he did this at a conference, and I imagine that most people in his audience would not have known that the information he was giving was inaccurate. And the few people who would know that the information was inaccurate, people who were actually lawyers and judges, there's no one that's going to stop him in the middle of a conference and say, hey, that's not accurate. They might go and tell him afterward, but he's not going to correct it afterward. And so they get away with saying things like this, even though, I wonder if he knew, and if he either was dishonest or he was very sloppy in his work.
So, okay, so that's interesting with Jay Warner. Now, I one of his books that I read, Cold Case Christianity, I really liked it, and that was, and then I read another book that he wrote after that, and it was good, but it wasn't quite as good as Cold Case Christianity. But so we've got J. Warner Wallace. We've got you named a couple of Protestants. Do you ever look at any other different faiths?
I've looked at Trent.
Hindu videos or Muslim
Trent
videos?
is one of the more honest apologists.
Trent Horn?
Yeah, Trent Horn.
Oh, I love Trent Horn. Yeah.
I've looked at Brian. I can't remember Brian's last name. He's a joke. He's Catholic.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I follow a Brian. I could be wrong.
I've looked at Father Casey.
I don't know him either.
A few of Father Casey's videos.
Utopia Buster's trying to create some little lawyer silly stuff. Actually, it's impressive if you've obviously got the degree to be a lawyer. That's a difficult degree to get. So that's definitely an impressive part of your background. So that was probably maybe we should have even mentioned that up front so people get the legitimacy.
I got that law degree from Baylor University, a Baptist university. So no, that does not explain it.
Interesting. So yeah, so so Utopia Buster says he or she, I think Utopia Buster might be a male. I'm not totally sure. I don't want to make an assumption here, but I identify as a non-denominational Christian anarchist. So,
okay.
Oh, Elisa, I remember her name now. Elisa Childers. That's the other one who was at the conference.
Oh, yeah, I've seen plenty of hers.
So you listen to a little bit, so you listen to a little bit of Elisa, you listen to so you definitely Frank Turk, listen to his stuff?
Oh yeah. William Lane Craig. Let's see. Who else?
I didn't get to see Frank Turk at the conference.
Brian's name is Holdsworth.
Okay, I'm not familiar with him. So, Now, my favorite I listen to Trent Horn all the time. Jimmy Akins has become pretty popular in my mind. I listen to Bishop Barron a lot. I love Bishop Robert Barron. I love his voice. It's just so smooth. So I have to say, and I do listen to some atheist channels. You guys don't believe that, but I've listened to Digital Hammurabi's channel. I've listened to Kip Davis, might not believe it, but I've definitely listened to him. And I follow Myth Vision, and Myth Vision's always tagging me on Facebook with different articles that they have that infuriate me. but I don't do anything on Facebook because I have like a zillion coworkers who follow me there, and I just, that's not where I want to talk about anything that is going to be at all controversial. So I just don't do anything on there.
Oh, and Ray Comfort. That's another joke.
Yeah, I don't really listen to Ray Comfort too much. Okay. So yeah, Kip believes that I follow his stuff because his stuff is great. So, and Captive Desk, I have seen your channel before, just to call out another channel that's out there. So here's Richard Madsen. I believe I've had Richard on my channel before in the past, a while ago. He says, if the majority of Christians read the Bible inconsistently with each other, why judge a text based on their view? Yeah, I have watched one of his streams. Bread of Life doesn't count as an atheist channel. Oh no, that's not an atheist channel. I don't think that's If that's Rebecca, I think that's, yeah. Did you see that? So if Christians have disagreements, is that a good reason to leave Christianity? I think that's what was being asked.
I didn't think that's what the question was,
Oh,
but
maybe
if
did I do it
if you
wrong?
wanna
Okay.
ask that question, no, I don't think that that's a reason to leave Christianity, but it is a reason to believe that there isn't an almighty God that cares about what you believe.
Okay, I want to say it. If the majority of Christians read the Bible inconsistently with each other, why judge the text based on their view? That's a better put question than my
Mhm.
rephrasing. So why would you judge the text based on people's inconsistent views? I guess you're saying no
Well,
anyway.
that's all you have, though. I mean, there isn't any God that's out there that's telling us how we're supposed to view this, and that's exactly the problem. If there was a God that said, "Hey, this is what this means," or better yet, a God that wrote something that was very clear to start with, that we didn't need someone to tell us what it means, yeah, that would be a much better case. But
Hmm.
when you've got, millions of people all saying, "No, you're reading this wrong. This isn't what this says." I have a hard time buying that there's a God there that cares that what you believe about it.
That's interesting. And we could go down a big road talking about a lot of that stuff right now, but because I was
We're
one
out
of
of
the reasons
time.
I came back to the Catholic Church. I listed a bunch of reasons in this video I made, but one of my reasons was because I had people like Robert Reed coming and saying, "There's 40,000 different denominations. You guys can't get your act together, so why should we believe?" And I thought, maybe we do need some sort of standard. And then I went back to the Catholic. So, okay. I wanted to say thank you for coming on my channel and being such a pleasant guest and sharing your views on so many things. I want to say thank you to everybody who's in the audience. What are you working on now, Godless Granny? Like, what are your projects?
I just released an hour and 40-minute video. It's a response to Flood Geology episode 4, where a meteorologist tries to explain geology. And geology is not my field. I got a professional geologist to help me with that one. And we go through that and talk about why the meteorologist is wrong about geology.
Hmm. It's so funny. In college, I took one class in historical geology and I took another class in meteorology. And I was bored to tears in historical geology, but I absolutely loved meteorology. Like, if it were my second life, I'd probably want to be a weather woman. It's like, I love the study of clouds. I mean, it's so fascinating. Okay. Do I think other Near Eastern texts useful for helping us to understand? Yeah, absolutely. Sure. I definitely think that other texts are very useful. I know Kip is a Dead Sea Scrolls expert. Certainly the Dead Sea Scrolls are of value. And of course, all the ancient writings, Josephus, Tacitus, there's other people who've written that I certainly would think are of value. And so, yeah, absolutely. Would you say so too? That we should look at multiple texts outside of the Bible?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Or, I mean, a Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm not trying to say that's outside, but yeah, Utopia Buster. You guys, thank you for coming in. One last thing here for one quick follow-up for you here. It says, consistency cannot prove, but only disprove. The reading frame of all Christians is inconsistent. Why use any wrong reading frame? I'm not sure what not really sure I can. I guess the idea that we can be inconsistent. So anyway, okay. Well, thank you again for coming on my channel. Now, besides that, is there anything else that you'd like to mention? Anything that we have a question that you didn't feel like you fully answered or anything like that?
No, I think we covered everything.
Okay. I don't know if I have you in the description listed, your channel, but you guys go ahead and please subscribe to Godless Granny's channel. She's got quite a few people subscribe. I think you're up to what, 8,000 now or something?
7,500.
Yeah, she's making her way, making a big a big splash out there. So be sure to go ahead and follow her channel and see what she has to say. She's always inviting people on. I do watch your channel periodically, just so you know. Sometimes I say so in the comments. Other times I don't. I mean, I'm in the chat when I see it's live. I love catching people's stuff when it's live, particularly. So you might have seen me in there here and there. So just to mention that. So yeah, and I agree with that. John 3:16 for Utopia Buster. So thank you, everybody. You guys, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. I am going to have a woman who's written a book on my channel tomorrow at 12:30. or no, I think it's 12:30. I got to double check that. And then I'm having Steve McRae and another atheist, or an atheist called Ozian, on my channel at 4:00 Eastern tomorrow. And then I'm having Dr. David Falk on my channel next week on Wednesday at 4 p.m. So be sure to start watching. Again, I made a ton of stuff this last couple days because I'm on the very last part of my spring break. So once I get back into work, I'm not going to be able to make as much. But you guys, thank you for coming in here. So, oh, there is a hashtag, so you should link directly to her. Yeah, actually, that's what I'll do in the title to this. I'm gonna put a hashtag with your name so that people can just click right on it. And if they do retweet this, that you'll see the tweet. So, great. Well, thank you guys. You guys have a wonderful day. Just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for God.